So something rare has been found. Not rare in terms of the N64 rare games like GoldenEye or Conquer or Banjo. We're talking a rare prototype. We are talking a prototype system. We're talking the N64 disk drive.
Except it wasn't even really a prototype. This appears to be a retail-ready model.
Well, okay, using the word prototype a little loosely, but yes, it was almost like, okay, this is what the system's going to look like.
Basically, the 64DD lacked the markings of the dev kits that people in the U.S. were used to seeing, certain colored borders and things like that. It also displayed that it was a U.S. region system.
So this was found by YouTuber Jason Lindsay, otherwise known as MetalJesusRocks, who has met us before. I think he's a fan of the podcast.
Yeah,
nice guy. Used to be a
I met him once. He was really nice.
Used to be a play tester for Sierra back in the day. So this blew up. So if you don't know what the 64 disk drive was, came out in Japan, I believe 99. It held how much? You said 64.
It's a 64 megabyte proprietary discs.
It looks like a giant zip drive disc.
Yeah. Kind of makes sense. Nintendo always seemed to have kind of a penchant for add-ons back then.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the Super Nintendo one that never came to fruition a little bit later. But there was the 64, or there was the NES disc, the Famicom disc. Excuse me, a Famicom disc drive. Then there was an attempt at CD, and then I think Nintendo's went back to slightly more solid state, less destructible media, and tried to do a disc drive for the Nintendo 64. Unfortunately, even in its own home country of Japan, this system was a flop, being on the market for a grand total of 14 years, with 4 released games for it.
Whoa.
2 God Sims, a Sim City and Doshin the Giant, F-Zero X with a track creator that was not included in the cartridge version in the US.
That's a cool idea, actually.
And a basically a Mario Paint sequel called Mario Artist. And then there was about 19 unreleased games, most of which, but not all, such as Mother 3, that saw their way into cartridge form.
There was going to be a Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium, a Legend of Zelda version of Majora's Mask. So this sold horribly. It must have.
Yes.
We're talking, by time 99 that's already what? In Japan, 5 years into the PS1.
Mm-hmm.
N64 is not dying, but in its late middle ages by then. 3 years in. Well,
it's obvious that it's not going to pick up the steam that Nintendo was hoping.
And so they probably figured, like, ooh, this is not going to happen. Let's, I guess, turn towards that GameCube development that's going to come out in a couple of years.
Right.
That's basically what happened. They made the right move.
Yeah.
Because a higher capacity N64 game is still nowhere near a PlayStation 1 disc.
It's 64 megabytes compared to 720 on an average CD from that era.
You still have all the compressed sound files and sprites you got to deal with. You got to play around with the magic in there in order to get something. You're still not going to have a Final Fantasy game on the 64DD.
No.
It's not going to happen. So that's why Nintendo said, screw this. And that's why Nintendo never came out with it in the US. It makes perfect sense.
But they obviously were considering it.
Sure.
They had to.
So the big difference here is the fact the loading screen is in English. The loading screen says Nintendo 64. Mario hops around in his cute 3D polygonal self, and it says, please insert disc in English. It came with a blue disc, a shiny blue disc, that unfortunately we don't know what's on it yet because this system is sort of like it's region locked still, even though it's a US ready to go prototype model, whatever you want to call it. So hopefully that disc gets dumped. We find out what's on it. Maybe it's a prototype game, maybe it's something else, maybe it's a demo disc showing it off for a trade show. That would be cool. What's interesting, according to this Ars Technica article, though, is that one commenter claimed, and this is just what he said, this is a promoted comment, that he owned 50 of these U.S. systems. And he says he's holding on to them, and he's going to sell when the prices peak, then buy a boat and retire. I don't know how many of these they could have made. They probably made more than one.
Sure.
Who knows how many they put together for trade shows that they never really wanted to show it after they put them together. Who knows? It does say number 1 on it. I'm not sure that means that's the first one they made, or this was the first version of this that they made to present.
Well, I mean, you never know exactly on the business end. They could have made 50. They could have made 100. They could have, like you said, been ready to demo these. And, I mean, 14 months is a short period of time for something to crash and fucking burn.
Yeah, that's Virtual Boy.
Yeah,
territory.
exactly. Right, and that's actually what I was going to say earlier. It's very much Virtual Boy territory, and it could have been they had these ready to go, and they're like, no. No, we're not.
No,
we're already in a weird spot with this system. We are not advertising another add-on that has nothing ready for it.
They saw the horrible sales in Japan and were like, okay, this is not going to work out here. Throw it in the garbage. I don't think I've seen. I don't think he doesn't have to reveal where he got it. But I'd just be curious where it came from. But yeah, not much else to say here other than I want to see what's on that blue disc, that shiny blue disc. I'm sure it'll get dumped at some point. That freaking zip disc looking thing. That's the first thing I think. Remember the zip disc phase?
Oh, yeah.
We all went through before. We said, "Oh, let's do that whole CD thing instead of zip disc."
100 megabytes held a whole lot more porn than 1.47, but then we got CDs.
We got the high density disc. Did it double? It did close to 3. The high density 3.5s. That's funny. So all right, maybe I'll ask Jason when I see him in a couple weeks. I can ask him more about this. That'll be cool.